afternoon.
Hi, Vivian.
I'm welcoming you to Jerusalem Life Coaches, Tzippi Moss.
Nice to be here with you.
And I would like to know a little bit about you. Can you tell us a little bit about your career development?
Okay, first I'd like to just mention I made Aliyah back in 1979, so I've been here in Jerusalem for quite a long time. And in terms of how my career developed, I got my master's in counseling psychology back in 1983 in the United States. Then I moved back to Israel, did a number of different things. My husband went through a crisis, you could say, a minor crisis of the difficulties of living in this country. And he wanted to go back to the States before he so got fed up here that he never wanted to live here again.
Right.
So then while we were back in the States, I used my background in counseling psychology to work for a very large employee assistance company,
Wow.
which is something that doesn't really exist in Israel. It's a brilliant idea. It allows employees and their families from middle-sized companies and up to have a 24/7 service where they can call with any problem under the sun and talk to a
Wow,
professional.
that's something.
Really any problem under the sun. It was quite funny. I mean, you'd get anything from actually how to baste a turkey for Thanksgiving to how do I deal with a troublesome boss to financial difficulties, among other things. So I trained in a number of different specialties, including financial coaching.
Wow, that's something else.
Yeah. And then when I came back here, one day it suddenly hit me. I came back in 1995, right before things began to get really difficult. And I suddenly realized that the background that I had in the financial coaching, the problems that people were experiencing in America, were similar to the problems here. And and so I began to work in that area.
That's
among other
amazing.
things.
So you worked as a coach. At that point, there was very little certification going on, right?
Yeah, I don't think they actually called it coaching back then. We got a lot of training in short-term therapy, that modality, which is really very, very similar to coaching.
It's very similar. And in business, it's always been more coaching than therapy. You know, there has been that distinction more or less, I think.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what people are interested in is solutions. They want to know how to progress. They don't want to delve too much into the past and stay.
Right. Okay, so you've been telling me that you've gone into a very specialized kind of area in coaching at the moment, that you've been doing talks on something called financial coaching, or how would you call it?
I see myself as helping people progress financially. I've really had a variety of clients. At this point, I've worked with hundreds of people, and you could say anybody from successful business people to Haredi women who are single parents, who are really dealing and struggling with a lot of problems. But people are people, and so we're all dealing with similar things around money. One of the reasons I became very interested in using money or the financial piece as part of my practice is that money is a wonderful tool for transformation. It really is. It's like you begin to make changes regarding your relationship to your finances, and you can see ripples in all the other places in your life. It's a fantastic mirror.
It really is amazing, because that's the one area that tends to be totally neglected in people's basic education, unless they choose to go into a financial area.
Right. And yet, I mean, and at the same time, it is such a source of problems for so many people.
Tremendous. I think because there's no savvy, because there's no basic knowledge.
Right.
People just get lost in it. It becomes this elephant that blocks the road.
Exactly.
That spots you all the time.
And I'm sure you know from your experience with coaching, when people are frustrated about their money situation, that impacts all the other places in their lives. And it's just terribly frustrating. At the same time, if you can focus in on this one particular area and help people make changes, then you really do see differences, oftentimes in terms of their ability to go forward on their dreams, their ability to be happier in their relationships with other people, their self-confidence. I've seen that over and over again. Just to give you some examples, I worked with a woman who called me up, it was about 9 months after we had finished working together, and she called me up to say, guess what? In this last year, I went back and I looked at what I did since before I started working with you, and over the time we began working together, and I have managed to, get this, save 30,000 shekel. Now that's quite remarkable, I think, for the course of 1 year.
Wow.
Okay.
That really is.
Yes. Or another example of a woman who we began working together around the money things, because I work actually on a number of different levels. I say it's not enough to give people just the practical tools. You can give them the practical tools, but if you don't touch into the spiritual aspect of money,
right,
and the behavioral belief aspect of money, what people
right,
believe about it, or what they don't even know they believe about it,
right,
then you can't really make changes.
Wow, that's saying something very deep, Tzippi. You say it so easily, but I think it's very deep.
Well, let's think about it. I can give you an interesting example of how this plays out. It's usually not, it's usually our unconscious beliefs that are motivating us and that are getting us into trouble. Because if you ask people out there, I'm sure if I asked any of your listeners who would like to have more money in their life, I'd guess 99.9% of them would say yes, right? And yet at the same time, so many people are feeling like it's not enough. I wish I had more. Why am I struggling? Why do I get to the end of the month feeling so frustrated? And it's so problematic. So an example of a person who demonstrates this belief was a woman who said, you know, I don't understand it. We used to be, me and my family, much worse off. And now we actually have lots of money coming in. And yet we find ourselves getting to the end of the month always in minus and overdraft. And I don't understand why. I don't realize why this is happening. And as we began to talk, there was a pattern that kept on coming up over and over again that she wasn't even aware of. She couldn't hear it. It's like we all have our personal blind spots too.
Right.
She began to talk about how when she was growing up, her family was not well off at all, that they were quite poor, really poor, much poorer than her current family, you know, her husband and her children.
Right.
But she talked about it as if, you know, back in those days, it was so remarkable. We didn't have very much of anything, but we were so happy together. We were so happy. And she'd go back and talk about the values and the intimacy and the closeness. Then she would move on to another subject, and she would talk about how today her children want, and they want this, and there doesn't seem to be any intimacy in the family. It's very frustrating. And I suddenly began to make a connection between the fact that she believed that the only way to get family happiness was to be poor.
Wow.
Okay? To be like her family growing up. Now, she had no conscious awareness of this.
Yes.
Now, when we began to talk about it, it's like a light bulb went off in her head, and she began to recognize this unconscious belief was keeping her in overdraft, in the hopes that her current family would be happier and closer together.
That's so amazing. And I think there are a lot of beliefs like this about money. Money is a very big issue. And it seems to be something people feel controlled by if they don't learn to control it.
Yes, you said that very, very well. So the idea is to help people become masters of their finances rather than the finances mastering them, which is the situation so many of us are in.
Right.
And as I said, once you begin to work, it's like if we look at what's the minimum number of legs you need in a stool to keep it steady. You need 3. You need a minimum of 3.
Yes.
So that's why I say you really need to work on a behavioral level, which is giving people basic tools that they may never have learned, but also looking at the emotional and belief aspect, like what unconscious beliefs might be keeping them stuck, might be keeping them from moving forwards. And then the spiritual aspect, which Judaism has a lot to say. Here in Israel, I don't think it's quite as common. Maybe it's beginning to get a little more widespread. Certainly things like The Secret, the movie The Secret that everybody's heard about, which talks about abundance and how to manifest what you want, that has become very, very popular. But the problem is that The Secret over-focuses on the manifestation and belief piece, and then it doesn't bring it together with the behavioral pieces of how do I change my actions.
Oh, yeah, it's when people hear the how to change the action pieces, they switch off. Yes. Tzippi, wonderful. Thank you for the interview. And I'm going to invite people to contact you. How do they do that?
They can either reach me via email. My email address is T as in Tom, Z as in zebra, I, 2 P's like Peter, I.Moss, M-O-S-S. Then the strudel in Hebrew, or the @yahoo.com. Or people are also welcome to call me on my cell phone, which is 052-563-8988. And I really look forward to helping people transform through their finances into creating the kind of life they want to have. It's such a wonderful tool.
Well, that is very lovely, and thank you for the interview. And I hope we'll be hearing a lot more about your courses in a future date.
Well, thank you, Vivian, for inviting me here today.
Terrific.